This is for the girls that eat the same portion sizes as their man, and also for those who can potentially outperform them at an all-you-can-eat restaurant. And if you're being insulted by the idea of going to eat at a gourmet restaurant, then you might as well stick around, because today we're talking about the satiety factor and how could you improve your appetite regulation so that you can stick to your diet and your fitness goals. By the way, this is not a video where I'm going to tell you to drink some tea to suppress your appetite or also chew some gum. So if you're expecting that of me, I might as well show you the door. Second thing, if you're eating something like 1200 calories a day and you're respecting some of these tips to actually help you out, that's probably not going to happen because you are underfueling yourself. We're going to focus here on ways that you can make slight tweaks to your regime that could make a difference in your appetite. In this video, we're not going to be discussing the psychological factors of hunger and satiety and how stress, for instance, can impact that, but if you're interested, I have a separate video on that you could check out. So let's get right into it. First of all, we're starting off with the meal frequency, and by meal frequency I refer to how many times per day should you eat to feel more satiated. Over the past decades, there have been a lot of theories around how many meals should you need to have per day, but this review that I have right here sheds some light onto the topic. Here the researchers investigated whether having more than 3 meals a day has a positive impact on satiety compared to having less than 3 meals per day, so that would mean only 2 or even 1 singular meal for the entire day. After analyzing all of the studies, the authors concluded that having 3 or more, so 3 meals is also sufficient, leads to an improvement into the satiety signals, and having less than 3 meals per day actually results in negative appetite control. I think you have also personally observed this if you've ever had to go way too long without food in a single day. These huge time windows lead to increased hunger, and also after when you start eating, your satiety signals are sort of numbed, and then you need to eat more than usual in order to get the same satiety and satisfaction factor. Second point, meal timing. So by meal timing, I mean, should you be having more of your calories earlier or later in the day? Does it matter at all regarding appetite and satiety? This study that was done on overweight and obese individuals investigated whether an isocaloric diet with different distribution of the calories throughout the day would have an impact on the weight loss and the satiety of the participants. Here, one group was subjected to a diet that had 45% of the daily calories consumed in the breakfast, and the remaining were distributed over lunch and dinner. And the second group had these 45% at dinner, and the rest of calories were consumed at breakfast and lunchtime. Here, the outcome of the study was that the participants lost the same amount of weight in both groups, but the ones that were consuming their calories earlier in the day reported better satiety, better satisfaction overall with the weight loss program. The authors did not talk about the reasoning behind this, but if you think about it logically, it might have to do something with your circadian rhythm. And secondly, consuming larger amounts of food at dinner later on in the day also has some other negative influences on your health. Starting off with the impact on digestion. If you have a very large meal at dinner and you consume it less than 2 hours before bedtime, then that might lead to digestive issues and also poor sleep because of the stress that you put on your digestive system right before you go to bed. Additionally, there was some research that I went over for my PCOS video that investigated the impact of caloric distribution in a similar way as in this study on women that suffer from PCOS, and they also measured their hormones, and this study found that the women with PCOS that consumed their calories later in the day were impacted negatively in terms of hormones by this meal distribution. This is why it is very important to eat most of your calories during the day. It does not have to be at breakfast. I know that not everybody is a breakfast person, but the most important thing is not to do it at dinner, and especially not right before you go to sleep. And since we're on the topic of meal timing, of course course, we have to mention intermittent fasting. I feel like there were some hypotheses about intermittent fasting that it can help regulate one's appetite, especially during the fasting periods, because during the fast, technically your body is supposed to go into ketosis, and then these ketones that are generated and now circulate in your blood can help suppress your appetite. This can only be partially true for some individuals, since not everybody that's doing intermittent fasting even enters ketosis. By the way, ketosis is the process where your body has already used up all of its carbohydrates for energy and now has to turn to fats and starts breaking them down, and these compounds from the fats that are used for energy are called ketones. So ketosis is the process that your body would enter around at least 12 hours after your last carbohydrate-rich meal. It depends on a variety of factors, such as the consumption of carbohydrates prior to the fast, and also it depends on the individual. It depends on your organism if your body is going to enter ketosis after that 12-hour mark or not. Another psychological factor would make more sense, probably that during this fasting period you cannot eat anyways, so you're kind of robbed of the thoughts of food. You do not have to think about your next meals, since technically there are no next meals if you've entered the fasting period, like when you're done for the day. And secondly, intermittent fasting as an approach is more flexible during the eating windows compared to some other approaches. There was this paper that consisted of multiple studies on intermittent fasting and satiety, and here the hypothesis was kind of the opposite. Because of the prolonged fasting periods, that the appetite of the people doing this regime would then maybe increase or not. It generally found that intermittent fasting did not have any negative or positive effect on appetite, so it was kind of a neutral outcome. Therefore, you do not have to do intermittent fasting if you want to have a better regulation of your appetite. It does not appear to have as a large impact as some people make it out to be. Moving on to exercise. The most common belief here would be that exercise would technically increase your energy needs and would also increase your appetite. Therefore, the findings of this paper might actually surprise you. Here, the researchers went over studies that were investigating men and women, both overweight, obese, and also trained individuals, and how exercise impacts their satiety. The findings were very contradictory, and there might be more factors than previously thought that come into play. To begin with, there might be some sex differences when we are talking about the impact of exercise. Some studies done on untrained, overweight men and women subjected them to an exercise intervention, an aerobic exercise intervention, and they found that there was an increase in the hunger signals of the female participants, but not in the male participants. On the contrary, on another study that was done on men and women, but this time not overweight or obese, this time they were healthy individuals that had some experience with aerobic training prior to the study. This study then found that the exercise intervention, it was a similar exercise intervention by the way, had no impact on the hunger or satiety signaling of both men and women. So we're not sure if it is the fact that there are male and female participants, or is it maybe just the overweight factor in women that makes them hungrier. There were some other studies that investigated different types of exercise, more low impact and more high impact, and they concluded that the low impact exercise, by low impact you might think something like walking or even like slow cycling or lightweight training, those tend to increase hunger more compared to high intensity training, because according to some studies, the high intensity training interventions could actually lead to a release of more of the satiety hormones in your body compared to the other types of trainings. Some satiety hormones, just to give you an example, are GLP-1. This is also the one that they put in Ozempic. It is secreted in your small intestine. Another one that is secreted in your small intestine is peptide YY, again another satiety signal. The main hunger hormone is also So ghrelin, if I have to mention it somewhere throughout the video, ghrelin is secreted in your stomach, and it is the one that initiates hunger and your next meal. Here in the same paper, researchers also go on to talk about low energy dense foods a bit, and how their consumption in women that are very highly active might have some negative impact on their overall energy balance. This is because low energy dense foods tend to positively affect your appetite regulation, since they are higher in volume but are lower in energy. To give an example of foods like this, think about just fruits and vegetables. They are very high in water content, they do not have a lot of calories, but they have a lot of volume. Some medium energy dense foods would then be, for instance, even whole grains. You could also put pasta here, since it absorbs a lot of water, fish, chicken, or even low-fat dairy products, or even normal fat dairy products. It doesn't make that much of a difference in the energy content. And some high energy dense foods would then be very high calorie foods, basically for the amount of volume that they have, such as cheese or nuts. Even high energy density does not equal bad, and low energy density does not equal very good in the same manner. It just relates to the amount of calories per portion size, or like per 100 grams, however you put it. These foods that are higher in volume then tend to fill up people more, just because they take up more space in your stomach and your intestines. It makes perfect sense. They also contain a lot of fiber usually, especially when talking about fruits and vegetables. Also beans, I had forgot to put beans in the group with the medium to low energy density foods. And fiber can also have a positive impact on satiety, since it does absorb some water in your intestines because it reaches your gut undigested, and then it leads to you feeling fuller. It is a very positive strategy if you want to keep your portion sizes the same, but you want to be in a slight caloric deficit for a cut or for weight loss, any type of goal like this. And then you can actually adopt, if you want, this is a very popular approach where you split your plate with one half is the vegetables and fruits, and then 1/4 is your protein source and 1/4 is then the grains. Because for some people, even mentally, having a portion size with the size of a fist, this is kind of became very popular again recently. It's just not realistic. It is to some degree not mentally satisfying to eat this much. If your eyes and your mind are not satisfied with it, if you're one of those kinds of people, going for larger portion sizes in terms of volume but the same energy is something that I think can really help you out. Also, most of these foods are generally great for you anyways, because you're getting a variety of nutrients this way. Anyways, I'm getting very off track with this. The main point here is with very highly trained individuals, the authors meant that having these low energy dense foods might contribute to them not fueling properly, and for women especially developing some negative conditions such as the loss of their menstrual cycle, or it could also lead to a decrease in bone density, increased risk of injury, and etc. But again, they meant this for very highly trained, for women that are more on the athlete spectrum. Other studies have also emphasized the possible very positive impact of low energy density, high volume foods for weight loss interventions. On the topic of macronutrient distribution, the research here gets very contradictory. This is because up until now I was talking about how it's suspected that the ketones and ketogenic diets might have a very positive impact on hunger and satiety because of the ketones. And here the research also says quite the opposite at the same time. There were multiple studies that investigated the impact of high carbohydrate meals that are low in fat versus low carbohydrate meals with high fat, and the impact of those on your satiety. And these studies were conclusive that the high carbohydrate, low fat meals were actually more beneficial than the ones that were high in fat and low in carbs, and they led to improved satiety and also better overall satisfaction with the diet intervention. My take here would be not to overthink the carbs and fats distribution and go with what feels best for you. Talking about protein, you know that protein is great for you. Protein is the one thing that when you're going on a weight loss intervention, it helps you preserve all of your lean mass, all of your muscle mass, which leads to you being more metabolically healthy, not suffering from metabolic adaptation and a slowing down of your metabolism. Protein is also the one of the 3 macronutrients that has the highest diet-induced thermogenesis. This is the energy that your body has to spend when they have to digest the food. Apart from that, a higher consumption of protein has led to, in multiple studies, to the increase in the satiety hormones circulating in the blood, such as GLP-1 and the peptide YY that I already explained. By the way, a sufficient amount of protein is anything between, let's say, 1 to even, going extreme, 2 grams of protein per kilogram body weight per day. 1 is more for the not physically active people, to be honest. It's for people that do not participate in much resistance training or at all. But for people who are more highly physically active and that have regular trainings, then anything between 1.5 or 5 or 6 and 2 grams per kilogram body weight per day seems to be the standard for protein intake if you want to build some muscle. Anything above that does not necessarily mean that you're going to absorb it or have some advantage from it. Our body cannot absorb all of the protein that we're giving it and gets rid of any excess that it cannot make any use of. I want to make another point here regarding very extreme caloric deficits, so stay with me for the next 2 studies. Those are the last for the video. The first study put on a weight loss intervention overweight and obese individuals, stating they were all men, with a BMI above 30 kilograms per square meter. So you can imagine how their daily energy requirements would be somewhere between 2,500 to 3,000 calories per day. They were put then on a 750 calorie deficit. So from those, let's say 3,000, 750 are subtracted. So they're still eating a pretty good amount of calories. Like, it's a bit of a great deficit, but considering their total energy requirements, it's not that bad as the next study that I'm going to cover. And they were then put on a normal protein and also on a high protein diet. And the group that was put on the high protein diet experienced better satisfaction with the diet, lower hunger levels, and generally they were thinking less about food during the intervention. The other study that I found again had overweight and obese individuals, but this time they were put on a very low caloric diet. They were consuming 750 calories per day. This is a very severe caloric restriction that nobody should be going on. They investigated the impact of this diet in 3 different forms. One was low protein, like 10% of the energy came from protein, so I don't know, 75 calories came from protein. Then 20% for the second group and 30% for the third group. And they investigated the impact on satiety and hunger. And then this research concluded that there were some slight improvements in hunger in the third group, so the very high protein group that had 30% of their energy from protein, and there was really no positive impact in the remaining 2 groups. You see, I mentioned in the beginning of the video that if you're in a very severe caloric deficit, increasing your protein or any of the other hacks is not going to do that much for you because you're already under eating, and 750 is kind of crazy. Just remember to fuel yourself enough also to be satiated. You cannot expect to not be hungry when you're under eating yourself and eating the calories of a toddler. The bottom line here consists of 3 to 4 tips. What do you take from this video? First, eat your calories in the earlier part of the day. Do not have a huge meal at dinner, since this is not only not the very best for your satiety and satisfaction, it is also not the best thing that you can do for your hormones and also for your sleep. Second thing, you could try having at least 3 meals per day or more to improve your appetite regulation. Having any less than that might result in increased hunger signals. Third thing, Eat adequate amounts of protein. Repeating this in every second video that I make. This has a variety of benefits for you. An increased amount of the appetite regulating hormones circulating in your blood is only one of them. Fourth thing, if you want to keep the portion sizes the same for the mental satisfaction of eating, then you might try incorporating more low energy dense foods in your diet to be satisfied with the amounts that you're having. Any other things like macronutrient distribution in terms of fats and also carbohydrates are not as important, since the research is very contradictory and the impact of exercise is also not studied sufficiently enough, especially in women, to make any definite conclusion. Technically, any form of exercise would then lead to higher energy needs, and any appetite suppressing effect of exercise would be temporary. It is not a permanent appetite suppressing effect. And also, if you generally want to perform well in your exercise, you have to fuel your body accordingly. So using exercise as a strategy to suppress appetite is actually very contradictory and not very smart. Anyways, I hope that you enjoyed today's video. Do not forget to like and subscribe if you did. Leave down in the comments below if you want me to do a video on a specific topic next time, and I'll be seeing you in the next video.